What's happening, guys? Edgy Outdoors here. I'm coming to you a little early this week, but I wanted to do a quick comparison on the Paramilitary 2 and the Manix Manix 2 Lightweight. So it's a question I see quite a bit online. You know, if you're out in the market for a new Spidey, which would you like? There's a lot of options. Doesn't have to be Spyderco, but I do tend to see people debating over these two more than a lot of other decisions they're making. So I want to start off just saying that, you know, these are base model paramilitaries, with the exception I did add a backspacer to my base PM2. So normally this is an open construction. But other than that, they are base model Paramilitary 2 and Manix 2 Lightweight. So we'll kind of go through just the generic specs on these guys to start with, and then we'll this is the Manix over here, and here's the Paramilitary 2. So to kind of go through these specs, if you will. When we start comparing the steels on these base models, again, even this Manix 2 is a base model right now. The Paramilitary 2 certainly has the advantage in this, and I think you'll find very few people arguing with that. The base PM2 has S30V, and the Manix 2 has CTS BD1. So again, these are the base models, you know, that you can see here. If you want to look, there is the CTS BD1 version. And then here is the S30V version, if it'll focus here, camera. So that is kind of one of the differences out of the gate. Now, I will tell you, you can get the lightweight in additional steels as well. There's a Maximet, which I don't even know much about that particular steel. There's an S110V that you can get. Paras also come in additional steels. There's M4, S110V, S35VN, and others. You know, there's a lot of sprint runs that happen on a lot more sprint runs happen on military, or exclusives happen on the Paramilitary 2 than happen typically on the Manix 2, but that could happen more often. So anyway, comparing these specs again is, you know, in case you want to compare how these things are going to fit and ride in your pocket and stuff like that. The overall weight, let's get this even here. The weight is a big difference in where the Manix really truly shines. I tend to like lighter knives in my pocket. I've said before, I don't really use pocket clips. So dangling at the bottom of my pocket, I certainly like a lighter knife, but Paramilitary 2, this is based off of my scale. Again, not necessarily any standards that they have. I got 3.8 ounces on my PM2, and then it's almost a full ounce lighter for the Manix 2. So, you know, if you can keep a knife under 3 ounces, you've certainly got my attention on this guy. Blade lengths, you know, are fairly comparable, right? You have 3.44 with a 3-inch cutting edge versus 3.37 inches with a 2.88 cutting edge. So the cutting edge on the Manix 2, even though it's got a beefier blade, at least the way it feels and looks, you know, the cutting edge is actually slightly smaller than it is on the PM2. So you will see the blade shape is an obvious difference also. On the Manix, you have more of the leaf shape blade, whereas on the Paramilitary 2, you have the clip point. So it's an interesting call on how you want to do the you know, the blade shape, and a lot of this goes back to the steel, I believe, as well. You know, the CTS BD1 steel, you know, it's much easier to sharpen, but they're both stainless, but you know, the BD1 doesn't hold an edge very well, and you know, it's a little bit softer than the S30V, and I think you need a beefier blade on this, you know, lighter steel than you do on the S30V. just my kind of general opinion on that. That being said, I still feel like a super fine point tip, if we look at this with the clip point blade, right? Let's see here. Get that in focus, right? That's a super fine tip that we have here. Come on, focus, baby. Come on, girl. There we go. So that's a super fine tip that we have on the PM2. So it's good that you have better steel for it. I'm not saying that's why Spyderco did that, but it certainly tends to make sense that they have a better steel on that with that, finer tip. Whereas you do have a tip on the Manix that's a little more robust. And there is a downside to that, and I'll talk about that here in a second. And that is actually in, my next point, which is the closed width of the knife. So as you'll see, if you compare the Manix 2, and we close these both up, we compare the Manix 2 width-wise, at the widest point, they're the same. Okay? Okay, let's see if we can get this in focus here. Okay, so at the widest point, how well you can see that, I can't tell, but at the widest point, they're basically the same width. Where it comes into what feels bigger in your pocket, there's a clear difference in, if we line these up, there's a clear difference in what feels wider in your pocket because of this leaf-shaped blade makes the almost saucer-like in your pocket. Now again, I'm not using a clip, so it might be less of a big deal to some of you. But for me, I like the fact that the Paramilitary sits a little bit smaller in your pocket right in here. It tends to keep up room. Now, as far as the construction of this, as we're talking about sitting in your pocket, the reason I put the backspacer in here is because sometimes my keys are in the same pocket. And I know a lot of people like to keep gunk out of their knives, so they like the open construction, the open pillar construction. Both of these have, when I put the backspacer in, have that closed construction because keys will dull a knife really quick in your pocket. But the standard as it comes is open construction here. So if I were to compare that to, say this one's another base model S30V, you can see it's open construction. So easier to keep clean and keep gunk out of it, but nothing the little canned air can't fix when I close it up, so that when it rides in my pocket, it doesn't get dull. Although I do love sharpening knives. It somehow relaxes me. So, that's kind of the difference in close width. I will say that, when we look at it, overall width, they're about the same. I think, in fact, I couldn't even tell you which one is a little bit smaller. It looks like the PM2 might be a little smaller, but I can't tell if that's the open construction or not. And there's a little more rounded edges on the Manix too. So, anyway. And as we look at the next piece, we look at the liner. Inside here, there's no liner. It is all their, I forget what they call it, their basic plastic resin that they use, versus a full steel liner. That's probably what accounts for the additional ounce inside this guy. Is the fact that it has steel liners. So the next thing is liner lock. So as we start looking, or not liner lock, but lock type. So as we look at this, neither one of these would be what you would call kind of the de facto standard locks in the knife industry. In fact, I believe they're both proprietary to Spyderco. Excuse me, Spyderco. The first one is the compression lock that comes with the Paramilitary, and it's basically a tab. It acts and kind of looks almost like a liner lock when you look at this. But what actually happens is inside here, this, and you can't really see in here very well. Let me try to zoom in, see if I can zoom in so you can see what's going on here. I'll try to explain. Okay, as we look in here, when we push this over, it releases. Now there's this pin. Oops. There's this pin that's in here, and this compression lock, it goes in between in between that pin and the blade when it's in place. And it basically creates a very small compressed window that, in order for that to give way, would have to be crushed. And so it creates a very strong lock. It's probably one of the stronger locks that are on the market today. In fact, I think other parts of the knife would probably fail prior to that compression lock failing. I just don't think it would. Now, that being said, we have another extremely strong lock in here, and it's kind of hard to show on the camera. But basically, if we look in here, there's a ball bearing that slides into this pocket where the blade opens. It acts very much like the Axis lock from Benchmade, although I'm sure there's some differences. You guys can leave comments down below, tell me what the difference is between that, but still a very strong lock. You end up with extremely good, if I zoom back out here, you'll see, you end up with, very good motion, right? As long as you can pull it, it's good motion. Same with the Paramilitary 2. Kind of falls. I'm doing it at an angle, so it's not falling great. But, both of these locks are extremely reliable locks. Now, I will tell you one of the downsides to some people. I'm right-handed, so the compression lock, the compression lock is great for me. If I try to do this with my left hand, so I extend it and I try to do it with my left hand, it's not quite as you could see. You don't have the way to grab both sides with it. I guess I'd have to play with it with my left hand to be more efficient with it, but I don't find the compression lock to be as friendly. Now, I do think that you're going to see more and more knives from Spyderco come out. In fact, we're seeing it, right? The Sage 5 just came out with the compression lock. The Yojimbo 2 has the compression lock. So you're seeing more and more of the compression lock. And I really think that it, especially since, Spyderco owns that patent, I would say you're going to see more and more. You're even seeing some designers and custom knife makers like Smock Knives start to integrate that and license it from Spyderco, which is pretty cool. And then so if we move on from there, we go to the pocket clip. Really it's just your preference. You can do tip up, tip down, with the Paramilitary. You can also do right or left-handed. So if you look here, you can do right or left-handed with the Paramilitary. The Manix 2 is only right or left-handed, and it's always tip-up carry. Now, for most people, that's not an issue. They like the tip-up carry. Nut and Fancy is a big proponent of tip-up carry. Again, for me, it's however I like the knife to look, because I'm very rarely using, unless it's a very nice knife that I don't want jingling with my keys or has sharp edges and don't want it with my cell phone. I tend to not really care about the pocket clip quite as much. So those are kind of the specs, how they compare out. Just a couple of other things, as we look at this, I really think both of these knives are awesome. I will tell you there is a sexier factor, I think, just in the Paramilitary 2, kind of, that sexiness to it. And I don't know if it's the blade just being a little more tactical looking or what have you. It just has this sexier feel. But, from a functionality perspective, they're both equally functional. They both have this, front finger choil, so you can, really bear down. I do think the grip on the Manix 2 is a little more solid and even maybe a little more ergonomic. Having just a slightly wider handle, I think, helps it. They both have excellent jimping on top. So, you can really press with your thumb, get down on it. Blade widths are very similar. So, I think the fact that these are compared so much is really kind of a symptom of the fact that, they're very similar looking knives. They both Spidey holes so you can flick it. They both have, fun locks to play with, stuff like that. They're both somewhat customizable. You see sprint runs and exclusives from both of these where you can get OD green or, the tan, or you can even go to eBay, get custom scales, or Etsy, get custom scales for either one of these. And custom backspacers. Now, you can't get custom scales for the lightweight, but the lightweight does come in a G10 model that does give you some, or the Manix 2 comes in a G10 model, which is heavier, but it gives you some options. As far as just getting a different knife, whereas these are all pretty much the same shape. You can even get the Manix 2 XL, which is a much larger version. Not much, but it's a fairly quite a bit larger than the Manix 2 lightweight is. So the customization, I think once you already own a knife, customization edge goes to the PM2, but you certainly have a lot of options in scales, steel, everything, also with the Manix 2. Now, I will say that I do think that one of the drawbacks to the Manix 2 lightweight is the inability to take it apart. Now, they do close construction, so in theory you shouldn't need to take it apart that much, but like Nick Shabazz, or however you say his last name, says, sometimes you just want to baby your knife. You want that ability to take it apart. And so, the fact that you can't on this is kind of a bummer. Again, not a deal breaker. I own it. I carry this pretty much every Monday, Manix Monday. So, kind of your call on what you think is more important there, but I do like the ability to be able to take this guy apart, clean it, do a spa treatment on it, what have you. The other thing that I will say that kind of leans me towards the Paramilitary, and the fact that I've got 4 Paramilitary 2s and 1 Manix 2 lightweight, is playing with it. If I like to sit on the couch and flick it. Some people like the pocket spinners. Some people sit and just flick their knives, and I like flicking the knife open, closing it, goofing around with my knives while I'm sitting on the couch watching a football game or whatever, especially when you're by yourself, not necessarily with a bunch of people where it gets annoying. But the Manix 2, you can do that a little bit, but this lock, and I don't know if it's just mine, but I've seen other people talk about these locks, it's not quite as thumb and finger friendly, hand friendly as the Axis lock from Benchmade. It's a little bit tighter, takes a little more pressure. It's very hard to do with one finger. In fact, I can barely do it with one finger. So, that being said, I still can do it on Mondays. And then other days I mix between flippers and paras and stuff like that. So, anyway, that's kind of the overall feel for it. I tend to lean towards the Paramilitary 2. Just for some of the reasons that I mentioned. But, ultimately, when we start looking at how much do these guys cost, the edge goes to the Manix, right? I mean, you can get a Manix for, you go and you look on Blade HQ or, KnifeWorks or whoever you like to go look at. The Manix 2 you can get for under $100, right around $80, $85. Paramilitary 2, this base black model, you're looking at, most retailers having that for about $120. So $40 difference, you do get better steel. So that's probably where a majority of that price difference comes in, and it's got a little more steel inside. But, if you're looking to spend under $100 for a knife, that Manix 2, case closed. You're not going to be unhappy. You're going to love this knife. It's going to be used for a long time. You look at Paul Manning, he's used his Manix 2 for how many years? He used it for 2 years without even needing to sharpen it. Now his was S110V, but I will say this B1, like even last night I was cutting steak with it, and you could just tell by it, rub it on the plate, the tip gets dull really fast. I notice a big difference in how fast this guy gets dull versus this guy. So, but again, you can go get the S110V version of this for, not a lot more. So from a pricing perspective, the edge goes to the Manix, especially if you're on a budget. And quite frankly, I think the cool factor edge goes to the Paramilitary 2. Now, as far as, you know, who's carrying what, and, you know, people having your knife out there, you know, a lot of times it's nice to have a knife that not as many people are carrying. I don't believe the Manix 2 is out there quite as much. You know, it's kind of an interesting thing for people to see, but it does have that plasticky handle. So it's, whereas this has G10, or, you know, you can get titanium, whatever you want with this particular, you know, some of these PM2s. So again, my preference is the Para. It's why I own more, but I do still carry this, and I love both of these knives. And so I think if you're looking and trying to decide, do I want the Paramilitary 2 or the Manix 2 lightweight, my personal opinion is buy both if you can afford it. But definitely you want to go somewhere where you can touch it, feel it, or a place that has a good return policy in case you don't like it when it gets on site, when you get it in your house, in your hands. So those are just my 2 cents. Again, great everyday folders, both of them. If you have any comments, if I gave any bad statistics or stats or anything on anything, please leave comments below. I don't mind being corrected as long as you're nice about it. And please hit that subscribe button. I'm trying to launch the channel. The more subscribers I get, the better the channel does, obviously. And I really appreciate your guys' time. You can also go to edgyknives.com if you want to see about sharpening services. But in the meantime, I hope you guys have a great week. Thanks a lot.